Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. What do we got today, Rick?
We got Week 12's trade targets.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
Got some disappointing news and some exciting news for some of you fantasy ESPNers out there. Some of you holding on to hope that ESPN Fantasy is probably the best place for you to hold your league, which it's not. They took away Taysom Hill's tight end eligibility.
I saw that.
That's kind of good news. That was fantasy people were screaming at each other on Twitter about this.
I know.
You people need to chillax. Like, what the freak is going on? You're all yelling at each other for complete nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, if he's tight end eligible, just make the wise decision and slide him in.
Yeah, people were saying it's like cheap to do it, is what I heard.
How is
That's
that
like
cheap? That's playing the game.
It's cheap to play on ESPN.
Yeah, that's what you get. The first thing I did in our league in Sleeper was check to see if he was tight end eligible.
Yeah.
I was like, I'll take, how many fantasy points did he have?
25.
I'll have 25 in my tight end position all day, all night.
He's a tight end.
People think it's cheating, but I'll say, you know what? If you understand the rules of the system, just go with it.
Sure.
Simple as that. Welcome to Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. I forgot to say yesterday, I turned 27.
Dude, you're old.
Yeah, bro. So I was at my parents' house and they were celebrating my my birthday, and my mother gave me a card. Now remember, she's in her 50s. She's not an old woman. And she wrote in the card, "Happy 26th birthday." And I said, "Thanks, Mom. I want to stay 26."
Wow.
I was like, she thought I was laughing at the card, and I was like, "No, I'm laughing at the fact that you think I'm 26 years old."
Forgot your age. That's funny.
That's awesome. So awesome. Anyway, it was my birthday yesterday, but today is the 25th. So
yeah, dang, dude.
Yeah, time flies. I feel like it's still March, and they're shutting down the whole government. But
if only.
I mean, you know, I wouldn't mind being locked in the house again.
Me either, honestly. At this point.
We've got a lot to get to in this episode. We got Week 12 trade targets. This is probably, for most leagues, the final week that you will do any form of trades. We will take this up to Week 13, which is usually the final week of the fantasy regular season, and then we will come up with some other forms. Maybe we'll do a special show that has something to do with playoffs. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
But before we jump right into our trade targets, check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FFChamps, on Instagram at thefantasychampions, at facebook.com/thefantasychampions. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe. 1,000 subs gets Rick's hair shaved off. We talk about every episode. You got to help us out, because if it doesn't happen,
you got to subscribe for it to happen.
Yeah. At this point, you're running out of time. Click the bell for notifications. Like and comment down below any trade targets you have. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platform, be sure to subscribe on those platforms as well. Leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. So let's jump right into the madness that is Week 12 trades. So I've been talking about the last couple weeks. Usually people do buy low, sell high. I said the stock market, all that crap. I'm going to say that this week, a lot of these trades are purely, if you're in a dynasty league and you still have a trade deadline that's not passed, I would say don't listen to any of this.
Yeah.
This is not a dynasty. Maybe we'll do some dynasty trade target shows in the off season. Right now, this is the fantasy season for redraft, and we are going to, these trade targets and these sells are more specifically related to playoff schedule, and trying to prep yourself for the playoffs. And I like to preface this show by saying, if there are handcuffs out there,
Yep.
that you have on your team, you have a starting running back like Dalvin Cook, and you don't own Alexander Masson, or you have Aaron Jones, you don't own Jamal Williams, or if you have Derrick Henry, and the guy Derrick Henry's back is probably on the waiver wire, to be honest with you, but if or you have Zeke and Pollard's out there, you know what I mean, he's not on the waiver wire, I would trade for those guys. But outside of that, these are specifically meant to prepare you for your fantasy playoff run, your fantasy championship. If you can start thinking about that stuff, that's great. So we'll start with the sells. We'll go to the buys. Let's get it kicking.
Good.
So first one is Kenyon Drake. Drake has been surprisingly good. The last couple weeks. It's been a pretty something I did not expect to happen last year, or during the offseason, I should say, is Kenyon Drake splitting work with Chase Edmonds because of the way they run their offense. I thought it was very unlikely that would happen, but that's what it looks like it has become. So the last couple weeks he had 9 against Buffalo, which is not great, but he did have 6.3 yards a carry. The only reason why he had a bad fantasy week is because he didn't score a touchdown. He had 16 rushes for 100 yards, which is a good week. He did fumble once.
Yep.
So that's why he didn't end up with 12 fantasy points.
Yeah.
But then the following week against Seattle, which should be an easier matchup, he only had 46% of the snaps, but he did end up with 14 fantasy points. But he went back to his 2.6 yards a carry.
Nice.
So with Kenyon Drake, I think there's going to be it's the drop in snap percentage over the last 3 games that he has played. And B, it's the fact that his playoff schedule consists of the Giants, which is not a bad matchup, Philly, and then San Francisco, both of which are not easy matchups at all. If you have Chase Edmonds, I would say at this point the same thing. If Edmonds I think had 14 points as well this week or something around that around that number. I could be wrong on that. But
Chase Edmonds?
What'd you say?
Chase Edmonds?
Yeah.
I think he only had. Oh no, he did. He had 13 points.
So I would sell either one of these guys, but the one with the name recognition is probably Drake.
Right.
So like I said, it's not going to be an easy stretch of games. If you can trade him for a wide receiver, or maybe package him together with a wide receiver to get a higher end running back that has a better schedule in the second half of the season, I wouldn't even be afraid of going out and getting, maybe a running back that hasn't lived up to his potential this season, and maybe sell him away to somebody that may look a little bit crazy to others. But, see, it's week 12, so this is it. You got to make your trades this week. I was going to say wait one more week on Dobbins, but he's going to be out. And
yeah.
So I would sell Kenyon Drake this week. Make sure your matchups for the playoffs are good for whoever you try to get in return. And do your best. I know Drake's not an easy sell.
No, he's not an easy sell, but at the same time, the amount of he's easier than you think he is because of the weak position that the running back is.
Right.
The running back position is so far this year. Everybody's so desperate for running backs. I guarantee you, almost every team in the league except maybe one could use an extra running back.
Yeah.
So he's still expendable unless if you're trying to get a running back for him, then it might not be as easy to trade him, but still not that bad. I think he's I could be wrong, but I think he's still a top 15, top 20 running back. Yeah, he's the RB20, I think, right now. So it's still not that bad. In the last 2 weeks, he has scored some decent points, 9.4 and 14. You can sell that as kind of a turning point. But he's got a bad schedule. He's got the Patriots, the Rams, a good one against the Giants, but then Philly and San Francisco. It just doesn't look great for Drake, who is disappointing because he's somebody that we both liked before the season. But I think he's just what you see is what you get with him. And he could very easily get another 14-point week, but then he could turn around and get 5 fantasy points.
It would also help. The playoff schedule scares me regardless. If Chase Edmonds went down, I'd still probably try to sell him. Obviously, it's past that. This is week 12. You're not going to see your trade deadlines this week. You're probably not going to see any more games or any more opportunities for a guy like Edmonds to go down. Not that that's an opportunity, not that I'm rooting for that to happen, but it's unlikely that you'll be able to use that as trade capital. So even if, though, I would still not be excited about him. But I think Kenyon Drake was all of the excitement that I think I and yourself put on him this year was more predicated towards, I guess, his opportunity in the offense, and that opportunity has not been there. It's been split. So
he was a much better running back last season too. Like we based it off what he did last year and it was a small sample size, but it was still half a season. And he was like fantastic. Like he was getting 7 yards a carry. Mm-hmm. Like he had 7 yards a carry, 3, 4, 2, 3, but then 6, 6, 5 or 6, 7, 5. So like he had pretty good. It was better than what he's doing this year.
Yeah.
In terms of yards per carry.
Right.
So
and I
he
think
was a better running back last year.
I think a lot of that does have to do with Chase Edmonds, though. Him being involved as much as he has been. Because he was a little bit last year, but he wasn't to the extent that he is this year. And I think the other part of Drake's game, not to talk about Drake for too long, but the other part of his game has been the fact that he's not getting target share, really.
Yeah. And
he had like 50 catches last year or something like that.
He did, but throughout the season he has not.
Yeah.
And that's where Chase Edmonds has affected him.
Yeah. So the second guy we have on this list, we've talked about some of these guys we've done before, and we'll probably repeat maybe next week, just in the last 2 episodes, because we've come to this point in the year where the lines in the sand are drawn. There's the guys who suck, and the guys who are good, and the guys who have bad playoff matchups are harder to sell than the guys with good playoff matchups. It's everything is involved. So Zeke kind of came off his last easy matchup of the season this week against Minnesota. He's had it's been a tough run for him without Dak. With Andy Dalton back, he did perform a lot better with his 18-point performance this week. 21 rushes, 103 yards, 2 catches, 2 receptions for 11 yards, and one of those catches was for a touchdown. So obviously 18 points, great performance. That's a Zeke performance right there. And the excitement can be there about him possibly performing into the future. The issue is that he's got Washington, Baltimore, Cincinnati, San Francisco, and Philly all have been tough against the run this year. Cincinnati I would be less concerned about, but the rest of them are tough matchups. And I think my biggest thing is that if you can take that 18 fantasy points if you can take that 18 fantasy point outing against Minnesota and trade it away to somebody, and try to get the name, because he's a name recognition guy right now. You might be able to get top 5 production or top 5 value out of him at this point. That might be a stretch, maybe top 10 running back value out of him, but
top 10 now.
I definitely think he's a guy. Like last year, I was able to sell Odell Beckham midway through the season, even when he was having bad games, on his name to get Dalvin Cook, which obviously is outlandish, but that's a situation that you can kind of have with Zeke, where you can leverage his name a little bit in trades to kind of get bigger name guys with good schedules to end out your season.
Yeah, no, for sure. Zeke is somebody who I think is probably the best guy on this list, because I think he's the easiest to sell. His schedule is just not great in this season. I know he had a good week this week with Andy Dalton. That's another selling point that you can use. You can be like, he struggled lately since Dak went down, but look, Andy Dalton's back. Now he got 18 fantasy points. He's back to being Zeke. And I think that's a very sellable pitch to somebody, when in reality, I just don't think that's the case, because in week 6, when Andy Dalton had his first start, he had 8 fantasy points. And then week 7, when Andy Dalton started and played a majority of the game, he only had 5.6 fantasy points. Yes, he had a good week this week. And I think, against Cincinnati in week 14, that looks like a good matchup. I think it's reasonable that he could get another 16, 17-point week. But other than that, I'm not confident in him getting another big week rest of the season.
Yeah.
Just based on his matchups. And I understand that the offense could be better with Andy Dalton than it has been, but it wasn't great when Andy Dalton started in the beginning of the season. So is that just because they played Minnesota, or is it because Andy Dalton actually turned the offense around? We don't really know. And I'm not willing to 100% confidently say that's because of Andy Dalton. and that he's turned the offense.
Don't judge the Red Rifle.
Listen, he's not bad, but he's no Dak Prescott.
That's true.
And I think playing against Washington again, playing against Baltimore, playing against San Francisco, playing against Philly, those defenses are all very solid. And it's just going to be hard for Zeke to play to the level of production that you expect him to.
Let's move to the next guy, sell DJ Moore. He had 18 fantasy points as well this week, and he had 17 against Tampa the week before. He's gotten a little bit more target share, and he looks like he's slightly more involved in the offense. The big issue with I was kind of surprised DJ Moore had as good a game he did this week with Philip Walker starting. It was like all the targets went his way. But with Bridgewater coming back, this game against Minnesota is a really, really good matchup. So it's going to be tough to sell him, especially if you need a win. But his bye week is in week 13, and then he has Denver, Green Bay, and Washington in the last 3 weeks of the season. So the playoff schedule is just not good. And he's had some really good games. He's had some really bad games. Fantasy Pros, I think, right now ranks him as like the wide receiver 28, which is way down there considering what he's been able to do so far this year. I think he's the wide receiver 12 overall, so he's a wide receiver 1. So you can take that. You can sell it. I think wide receiver 1s are really hard to sell for running backs right now because everyone really feels okay with their wide receiver position for the most part.
Right.
So I feel like it's going to be difficult to get DJ Moore into a position where you can get another running back, but you might be able to seal down like a mid-range wide receiver, mid-range running back too at this point for DJ Moore, maybe. If the team needs a wide receiver. So I would definitely sell him this week just based on the schedule for the postseason.
Yeah, no, I mean, we talked about this on a show a few weeks ago, like how at this point in the year, if you're selling guys, like you got to look at the playoff schedule. It's all about the playoff schedule right now.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a team that you feel like you're already going to make the playoffs, you're going to look for guys that are going to have good matchups and should succeed in the playoffs. DJ Moore has had a fantastic week the last 2 weeks.
Whoa, what's that beat there?
Yeah, I don't know. No copyright strikes. But anyway, but he's had a good week the last few weeks. But this past week, it's interesting because it felt like PJ Walker really liked DJ Moore. Like that was his guy. He had 11 targets, which was the most in the offense. And he was really looking at DJ Moore. He looked at all three guys, but DJ Moore had the most. But with Teddy Bridgewater, it feels like he kind of targets Robbie Anderson a lot, and Curtis Samuel gets involved in the red zone a lot. Curtis Samuel has so many touchdowns this season.
Yeah.
And that's not going to change. So with that in mind, with Teddy Bridgewater coming back, with the way they use Curtis Samuel in the red zone and how Teddy Bridgewater loves to target Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore will still be good, but with that playoff schedule as well and the bye week, I just think it's best to sell.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's quickly go over the buys because we spend so long on the sells. But Allen Robinson, we talked about him multiple times. It's all about schedule for him once again. It's probably going to be about schedule for all of these buys, but with the exception of one, maybe. But Allen Robinson like I said, his schedule rest of season is really good. He's not been, I would say, right now is the wide receiver 14 on the season. He's ranked wide receiver 13 on the ECR and Fantasy Pros. And he's been relatively good this year for the most part. He's been getting the target share that's been expected, but the touchdown upside for Allen Robinson was my biggest concern coming into the season, and it's been continually a big concern for him. It's the schedule, obviously, after the Week 11 bye. He's got Green Bay. Tough matchup. Not the best situation for him. Hopefully he can have a slightly better performance this week. It'll be concerning. But then he's got Detroit, Houston, Minnesota, and Jacksonville. Excuse me. And those matchups in the playoffs are just ice. Like that's stuff that will win you leagues right there. So I think trading him, he's not going to be expensive either. I don't think that I've tried to sell him in a lot of ways for his playoff schedule to get other positions to upgrade. Not because I think that I need to sell him, but just because maybe I can get an upgrade for him.
Sure.
And the market's not there. You know what I mean? And people don't really like Allen Robinson. And so the person that owns him is, if they want to sell, they're probably looking at him going, any offer that you really make at this point might be good for them. You know what I mean? So especially considering those last 3 games, he had like 17, 11, and 7. That's kind of what his whole season has been at this point. But it's like I think those people are going to be like, yeah, I'll definitely sell Allen Robinson to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you own Allen Robinson, you might have expected a little bit more than what you've gotten. And maybe slightly frustrated with the lack of touchdowns and the situation at quarterback now with Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky both injured, which doesn't look great for at least the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
But I think Trubisky at least will be back, and I'm not sure about Foles, but they'll be back at least by week 13. So this week might be tough because you don't know who the quarterback is. But granted, Allen Robinson, and we've talked about this before, it doesn't really matter who the quarterback is. He's going to get targets and receptions. It's just going to be about touchdowns. Because with Trubisky, with Foles, it doesn't change really with his production. I think he's a little bit better with Foles, but still it doesn't really totally change. He still gets targeted. So that's not going to change. And then once one of those guys comes back for that playoff schedule with Detroit, Houston, Minnesota, Jacksonville, he should consistently have at least very, very solid weeks.
Yeah.
And the owner might not really think about that because they're just like, it doesn't matter who his quarterback is or like whoever that third string guy is, or if it ends up being Trubisky, I just don't want anything to do with Allen Robinson. Yeah. And you can get him probably at a cheap price right now, and that would be a smart thing to do.
Okay. Number 2 on this list is Justin Herbert.
Oh, my God.
This is gonna be a hard one at this point.
It is kind of hard, yeah.
Herbert, though, I tried to buy him this week, and the person that sold him in our league had Amari Cooper go in the other direction. So I don't know what it's going to take. He's the QB7 currently. It depends on the hot water in your league. If you're a 6-point touchdown league, it's obviously going to take a lot. If you're a 4-point touchdown league, it might not take as much. Generally speaking, he's probably a guy that doesn't really have a lot of name recognition at quarterback at this point. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks that have been really successful this year. So he's probably on a team that has 2 quarterbacks that are very good. That's my assumption. Maybe he was picked up off the waiver wire and people just get lit. I don't know. But anyway, if you're trying to buy him at this point, it's going to be a little bit tougher. But he's got an easier playoff schedule with Atlanta, the Raiders, and Denver's a little bit more difficult. But he at least gets you there. And then against Denver, I think he can have a good game, a divisional matchup. He had 23 points against Denver in week 8, so I think he can have a good matchup against Denver this time around. But I think he's a good matchup, and if you need a quarterback, he's good matchups for the playoffs, and if you need a quarterback going into the back half of the season because your quarterback sucks or other such nonsense, I would definitely get Herbs.
Yeah, I think I picked him up in a redraft league, the home league that we're in, and I dropped him, and I'm like so mad about that still. And I picked him up I had him in a dynasty league, and I traded him for Russell Wilson, which like in theory isn't that bad, but I kind of wish I didn't do that either because Herbert is just that good. And he's going to continue to be that good for the rest of this season.
Shout out to all the people that drafted him in the 3rd round of rookie drafts.
Oh yeah, I did that, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
I
was going to take him too.
I didn't trade him, and I'm not going to trade him for anything. He's my guy.
Meanwhile, the quarterback that I drafted tore his ACL, so
hey, look,
crushed my soul.
He's still a stud. But yeah, he's got, as you said, Buffalo, Atlanta, Vegas. Those are 3 just mouth-watering matchups that he can probably get 25 plus, 25 to 30.
Yeah.
And even the games that he's might struggle in. New England's defense is not the same this year. And then Denver has been okay with the pass rush, but he was great against Denver last time, and I really don't think that's going to change. So every week, except maybe New England, I'm confident with him getting around 25 fantasy points. That's just insane. It's a potential league winner if you can get him on your team, and you can be confident that you're getting 25 points a week at that.
He might be able to match pound for pound just Kyler Murray.
Yeah, close
in the playoffs.
Yep.
So let's get to the final guy. This is going to be a little bit a tough one.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor manager's probably feeling good this week, but I don't know. I don't know if they're gonna sell him for too much.
Probably not. Still.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people are like, do I take the temptation of starting Jonathan Taylor against Green Bay? This week, Rick will give his facts that he gave me before the show about how much was taken away from Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, he had
he has 22 rushes, 90 yards, 4.1 yards a carry, 4 targets, 4 receptions for 24 yards. There's only 6 yards per reception, but that's the games that this is the type of opportunity that we were expecting when Marlon Mack went down. He only had a 55% snap percentage, so that's a little bit more concerning. But if this continues throughout the second half of the season here against Tennessee, Houston, the Raiders, Houston again, and then Pittsburgh, he's going to have a monster second half of the season. It's just, is this moron, Frank Reich, going to give him the ball enough to be able to get into a groove and get things done? This week, obviously, he was very good. But it's going to take a lot of Frank Reich changing his mind about Nyheim Hines, and Wilkins even got opportunities this week, and Wilkins blows. I'm sorry, Frank. Wilkins is terrible.
Yeah. So with Taylor, he had I believe he had 23 carries for 100 or 90 yards.
Yeah.
He had 3 runs. I believe it was 3 runs for 20 plus yards, including 1 run for about 30 yards. That was a touchdown that got called back because of a holding penalty. This tweet, I'm not sure if it's accurate, but someone said Taylor would have had 150 yards rushing if it weren't for the holding penalties.
Wow.
So he had a monster game and he was getting the bulk of the work, 23 carries, and that doesn't include those penalties. He would have had about 25, 26 carries without some of those penalties, because the Colts had a lot of holding penalties in that game. This could be a great sign for Taylor, and then he's still 100% worth a buy. Which is sad because we've been saying that, and then he'd get like 4 points. But against
follow it up.
If this is what he's going to be, if they decide to do this rest of the season and give him 20 carries a week rest of the season,
you got to have him on your team.
He's 100% a league winner because he's playing Houston, Vegas.
If that 150 and the touchdown held, I mean, he would have had a 25 to 30 fantasy point week.
Yeah.
Which is the breakout game that you're looking for. I mean, and he even said, too, that he said that it felt like the game slowed down for him, and for a running back, that's everything. It wasn't really until this point Miles Sanders started to kind of turn a gear last year. So, man, I'm telling you right now, this could be the turning point for Jonathan Taylor this year, if they give him the opportunity. And I think, it's gonna be interesting to see if that continues. But I might be hitting you up, Rick, for
okay.
Taylor. But
Fair enough.
We'll see. So those are our buys and sells for week 12. We have one more episode of this left, and then week 14, 15, 16, 17. I don't know what we're going to do, but it's going to be interesting. Fantasy playoffs coming at you. Don't forget to check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and we will talk to you tomorrow on Thanksgiving.
Later.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at TheFFChamps.